This is Daren Houck. He's with the Winhall school system. When Act 60 came into play, I don't know how many people are familiar with Winhall. It was the first school, I think, in the state of Vermont, maybe in the country.
Actually, in the United States. Correct.
That went from a public school to an independent school. And their funding mechanism changed. Everything that they did changed, including the educational philosophy. They've had fantastic results. Their students are doing very well. It's been very beneficial for their town. And I asked Daren to come today because at our last meeting we had folks asking about the independent school issue. It was on the floor. And there were representatives here that were concerned about issues of school choice. But having said all that, Daren.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. Let's go over the handouts quickly. My business card is there. The main view is a piece put together by the Maine Heritage Policy Center, and it reviewed what happened in Winhall before and after. It's just a historical piece, but it's great. It lets you know why the citizens chose to do what they did. Our view book just tells you a little bit about the school. The most comprehensive school choice book or piece in the United States is the ABCs of school choice. We actually have our picture in here this year. We worked with Freeman Foundation on some information. They were also putting out a lot of information about the North Bennington transition, which was great. Color copy of the presentation, which I can send electronically to anyone. And then the school choice survey for the state of Vermont, what Vermonters think. This was a 1,200 person survey put together by Paul DePerna in February 2009. So copies on both sides. Take all of them, actually, if you wouldn't mind, and pass along to the rest of the caucus. I would appreciate that. My name is Daren Houck, as Representative said, and I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. And here's again the handouts that I just discussed, and I will talk a little bit about the Vermont survey here in a minute. Here we go. So who am I? I'm head school at the Mountain School. I've been there since 2004. I have 17 years in education, and I always like to say this because people, for whatever reason, have backed me into a corner as I'm an independent school person only. I actually am a K-12 product of public schools. I got my master's degree at a public university, and I spent my first 8 years in public education, proudly so. I've taught in 3 states. I've been an administrator in 3 states, Ohio, Florida, and now Vermont. And I have to tell you, coming from Ohio and Florida, I have a lot of background in understanding of what school choice is because there are very expansive programs there as well. I'm the speaker and consultant throughout Vermont and New England regarding the transition of public schools to independent schools, which is a hot topic right now. I understand that. But it's important for you to know as legislators and the people in Montpelier to know how many towns are looking at this. And I put them up there. We have Addison, Bethel, Burke, Craftsbury, Killington, Manchester, North Bennington, Rochester, Thetford, and even more. I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people who want something different for a variety of reasons, but I can say there is a common thread, and that is choice. Whenever I do a presentation around the state, I start with this quote about transitioning a public school to an independent school. Those who really desire to attain an independence have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. And as with anything in the world, it is all about work. I'm not going to go through this. You can find this in our view book. This is the comprehensive study of the Mountain School. I can tell you, if you look back at, I'm not sure where to stand because I have to keep clicking this, so I apologize if I'm in anybody's way. If you go back to 1997, 1998 at Winhall Elementary School, it was the highest tuition of any school, K through 12 in the state of Vermont. It was $12,600 per child. Winhall was also one of the lowest performing schools. School board members, parents, and so forth that I talked to when I came to the Mountain School at that time said it was in either the bottom 5 or the bottom 10. There were a variety of reasons people were unhappy with the program, the performance, and the people at Winhall Elementary School. And that included, as I said, the low test scores, discipline concerns, inattentive teachers, TV Fridays, which is just that every Friday afternoon they had popcorn and watched movies as a whole school to build community. Tenure was a concern, and I'm not against tenure, and not against public certified teachers. I also want to make that clear, but there was a concern that they had the highest paid teachers in the state of Vermont, that there was an attitude that the teachers could never be gotten rid of, and their students were failing. That was obviously a concern. And there were several others. So the individuals in Winhall, the voters in Winhall, got together and figured out, what do we need to do? They didn't want to close the school. It's hard to remember, but at that time, Vermont was growing, the number of school-age children. Now we're in a 12% decline. We're actually tied for the bottom or the top, depends on which way you look at it, of losing number of students. We're in a negative. There are fewer students, as you know, in Vermont's education system today than in 1800. But at the time, Vermont was growing. No school would guarantee admission to every child, and that was very important to the citizens. So they couldn't just close, they couldn't consolidate, no one was interested. So what next? They looked at, well, Burton is right down the road. That is a publicly funded independent school, guarantees admission to children in the surrounding towns. St. Johnsbury, Lennon Institute, Thetford, and they decided to go ahead forward with that. So what happened? The Mountain School at Winhall, tuition in 1998-99 dropped to just over $7,000 per child. It was over a $5,000 savings. Our 2012-13 K-6 tuition is $13,160. So that's just a 4.4% increase in the last 15 years. Our scores above the state average in all NECAP areas. Our graduating 8th graders this year scored 13 points above the state average in reading, 16 above the state average in math, and 19 above the state average in writing. And that's impressive because in math and reading in the United States this year, Vermont ranked number 4 in both categories in the United States. So to be that far above the 4th best state in the United States is quite impressive. And then parents choose the Mountain School or another school that is right for their child. How has choice helped? In 04-05, Mountain School had 3% of our students that came from outside the towns of Winhall and Stratton. That's what we call our sending towns. We guarantee admission to those towns, and those towns, in turn, approve our tuition at their annual town meeting, which they have done for 16 years. We, again, will have our tuition paid in full by those two towns and guarantee admission to those kids. The difference is when I arrived in 2004, 2005, people didn't understand school choice. And there's different sides of that. Some people think it's great that the majority of kids, is actually 90% of Winhall students attended the Mountain School at that time. And people think that's wonderful, that's a good thing. But it really wasn't. People still had that mentality that this is my only option. This is the monopoly that I have to send my children to. And that actually was a negative thing for the performance of the school. 58% of our kids scored at or above grade level in math when I arrived in 2004. It was a very different philosophy. Today, however, 43% of our students come from outside of Winhall Stratton. We have now 9 towns, we have 2 countries represented at the school, and 33% of Winhall students choose MSW. They understand that there is choice, and that understanding to the Mountain School really motivated us to enhance our programs, to increase our achievement, to do whatever it would take to draw families, students from surrounding areas as well as from Winhall and Stratton. So in that same time period, where we went from 3% of the students from outside Winhall Stratton to only 33%, 56% increased enrollment. We've gone from 54 kids to 84 kids starting up this year. 48% increased math achievement. 2,000% increased fundraising. We received accreditation from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. We are approved for all 12 categories of special education. We're the only K-6 or K-8 independent school in the state of Vermont ever to be approved in all 12 categories. The other 4 schools that have approval are the traditional town academies: Burton, Thetford, St. Johnsbury, and Lennon Institute. We have created and maintained a 5-star pre-kindergarten program throughout that's approved through the Vermont Department of Children and Family, and we've been approved by the Department of Homeland Security for a CBUC-approved international student program, which means we can give student visas to international students. So those are some of the things that we did. We recognized that we had to be competitive, and families recognized that there were many good options, both public and independent. And so over the last 9 years that I've been at the Mountain School, I have seen Dorset School just test off the charts. Manchester Elementary Middle School recently has had some decline, but has been a traditionally very positive school. Floodbrook is increasing their achievement. Maple Street School, which is right down the road, it's a K-8 independent school. This competition, this choice has really improved us, the Mountain School. So let me transition a little bit into just what the studies say. When the title slide, if you can see, it's 11 plus 1 studies. I want to talk about a general look at these comprehensive studies. Here's a quote to remind us when it regards education and choice. But a wise and frugal government, which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned, this is the sum of good government. I don't know, Rob, he might be thrown in with you. People read a quote like that and don't know it's from Thomas Jefferson. So what does the research say? Education is a human and a passionate thing. We all have strong emotions about it. And coming from the public education side, I understand that public educators can oftentimes feel very sensitive, very defensive about choice and the idea that how it can draw money away and it creams the top, only the best students go, and it creates these high-ranking schools with only the smartest kids. But we need to stop as human beings and look at the research. And what does the research say? And repeatedly we will see this. So I encourage you to take this book, The ABCs of School Choice, and look at the research that is done. Now, I want to make sure that people understand, Friedman Foundation does not do the research. They pull together the research, and I'll talk about who does some of the research here. But they are independent schools, colleges, universities that do the research, and then Friedman does a good job of pulling it together. But the new report that shows the gold standard, meaning they have the highest, truest gathering of empirical evidence, they conclude that 11 of 12 studies show that all or some of those students achieve better educational outcomes when choice is involved. No study has ever found that choice participants were worse off than remaining in traditional public schools. So 11 out of 12 show that students do better, and one study showed no change. The report also...
Can you go back to that bottom again? Okay, so the students remaining in the school, there is not a change for the worse for them. Because one of the arguments I get all the time is that we're going to take the best students and what would remain St. Vernon would be only the lower level students. That has not proved out?
That is correct. That is correct. And it repeats forward. The research shows that here. 23 empirical studies on how school choice impacts public education. So this will answer your question. 22 show the resulting competition improved public school performance. No research has ever concluded that school choice harms public schools. So 22 out of 23 empirical studies, very positive, clear evidence, one, no evidence either way. But none has ever shown that it hurts it. Also, this middle paragraph, that empirical research related to school choice's impact on taxpayers, diversity, and civic values, that research consistently supports school choice in those areas. And then the study that we're talking about that was just released, Win-Win Solution, examined studies on school choice conducted by scholars at University of Arkansas, Harvard University, Federal Reserve Bank, Stanford University, and Cornell University. So places that we can trust, I believe, at doing great research. Also, according to the report, 7 of the 8 existing studies on racial segregation found giving parents educational freedom move students into more integrated school. And I had to throw this in here, just when I was looking at that research, that when you take Representative Peltz's comment on March 16th, that the closing of a public school and the opening of an independent school was akin to these religious schools being created in the Deep South during the desegregation era. And he was making that reference. And I just found it funny that actually school choice does the opposite. It pulls students, and especially if you look at the Waiting for Superman, if you look at the studies, watch the movies, see the documentaries about these low-income families that want something better for their children, they're taking children from traditionally high minority schools, failing schools, into white school, Hispanic schools, excuse me. They're providing more diversity for their children. It's not the opposite. Excuse me. All 6 of the studies on how school choice affects public finances. Coming from Ohio, my family's still there. I have family members that are educators. This is where one of the studies took place. It actually saves taxpayers money. And additionally, the report cites 7 empirical studies on civic values, 5 of which show, again, school choice strengthens students' commitment to democratic principles. 2 found no visible impact. No research found that school choice adversely impacts diversity, taxpayers, or civic values. The +1 study, and I'll go through this quickly, but what do Vermonters say? Well, very simply, 89% want school choice for their children. And I like how this first, and I won't read this whole thing, but if you look at the beginning of that paragraph, this survey shows a striking contrast between public opinion and public reality. And that's exactly what it does. Vermonters do want it, and so do you. It's very, very interesting that representatives and people across political parties are very, very similar in this. So if you look, the town tuitioning idea, 65% of Democrats, 64% Republicans, 62% of independents are for the idea of the town tuitioning, which is what happens in Winhall and Stratton. School vouchers, 62%, 59%, 57%. Tax credit scholarships, who knew? 54%, 53%, 50%. Charter schools, 62%, 59%, 60%. You see that people actually are in agreement regardless of their political affiliations. So nearly 9 out of 10 Vermonters prefer choosing a school for their child among options that include private schools, charter schools, virtual schools, and homeschooling. 2 out of 3 voters support Vermont's longstanding town tuition system. Also interesting to note that the intensity of those who favor town tuitioning versus those who oppose it strongly for or strongly against is outdone by a 4-to-1 margin. 27% strongly are for it or in favor of it, only 6% are strongly against it, which is very interesting. Here's, again, the same thing, just expanded about the tax credit and so forth, and school vouchers. So I'm not going to repeat that because you can get that data right there. So that's a little bit about what Vermonters think, and that was, again, was done in 2009, published 2009 by Paul DePerna, where he interviewed 1,200 Vermonters to see what they thought. The last section, very quickly, so that we can spend time. I know a lot of you are busy. I wanted to get through this. The last section is on common sense. Common sense often makes good law, says William O. Douglas, U.S. Supreme Court Justice. The United States has been the greatest country the last 50 plus years for a lot of reasons. And we can list a lot of those reasons very quickly, very easily. But one of those is our market economy. The understanding that competition is good. And I find it funny that you will not find a person, probably in this city, in this state house, that do not believe that competition for this actually gives me better service. Not always do I get the lowest cost with the server I choose, but I will typically get the best value. I will get good service. I have a lot of things to choose from. When you transition this idea of being able to buy a car, being able to buy a phone, being able to buy a laptop, into the public education system, for whatever reason, conversation closes down. Public education is the largest monopoly in the United States. And unfortunately, for the majority of children in the United States, it is driven almost entirely through their economic means. Poor families live in poor neighborhoods, because that's the housing that they can afford, and go to traditionally poor schools. Wealthier families live in wealthy neighborhoods or towns, and go to, most often, high-performing schools. So beyond your political belief, I am a strong advocate that school choice is what is socially just for our children. We have all of the data, which I just showed you. You can look at it any time. That it actually improves public school performance. It improves student performance, individual student performance. But beyond that, it's actually socially just. I have a very good friend who is a Democrat, and she calls her a dying blue blood liberal. Is that the term? I don't want to misquote her, but her statement was, since Milt Friedman, who was worked for under Ronald Reagan, known as a Republican, he created the idea of school choice. She said if a Democrat would have come up with the idea of school choice, the Democrats probably would have accepted it. Now that's her opinion, and again, I'm not trying to say political party, this or that, but I find that very interesting. We have a great opportunity here in Vermont to continue to be a leader in whatever area it is. We do lead the nation in so many areas. Even now, craft beers, I found out, looking at some recent research. I hope that we will continue to lead in school choice. We will not go backwards. Everybody else is trying to get what we have or go beyond what we have, even including religious schools. And I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of it or anything. I'm just putting it out there. You have Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida, Texas. They all want more choice. I hope that Vermont chooses to be a leader. People look at what the research says and recognize we can improve both taxpayer standing, or what the taxpayers are paying, what our children are doing, most importantly, moving forward with school choice. So that's it.
Thank you.
No, not a problem. Any questions?